All right, just came back in from shoveling. So how's everything going?
Yeah, I guess start with the fact that in both of our locations we've got some heavy snow. So if this thing goes down, that it has nothing to do with the Russians or the Chinese or the U.S. deep state. It's just it's snowing. It's coming down pretty heavy here in D.C. and the family's loving it.
That's a good way to give the disclaimer if we have some glitching or buffering or anything like that. So, and I'll add a further one that I am deep in the woods in West Virginia, not in hiding, but just visiting family at the moment in the snow as well. So we do have the reception variables for buffering for everybody. So with all that said, you and I reached out last week, and when the recent events kind of started unfolding on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, things like that, and we've been communicating, and I value your opinion, not necessarily because of your military history, but because of the way that you analyze and see patterns in the world. And I don't have the experience in militarily as you, but we both do see patterns. And one thing is you're really good at being able to see, the sides of patterns that you've seen throughout yours. And then my lens, I look at things from media, verbiage, semantics, things like that. And I think like together, it's very interesting as things unfold to talk about this with each other. So, I want to open this up that everything in this conversation needs to be taken in full context. I want to let people know that any clips that are put out or anything like that are going to be very intentional clips, and that anybody that has anything further from, certain statements or anything like that are made, we're encouraging everybody to do their research and to find out what it is we're talking about, because this is still a fluid conversation. There is not concrete evidence of any definition of everything being sealed and done and finished. So with all that said, let's jump right into kind of where your perspective is on this, now that we've kind of gotten the disclaimer that everybody needs to be clear. We're not looking for clickbait. We're not looking for views. We are looking to have a conversation about media discernment, about mental health, and we want people to understand that there's a lot of complicated things going on, and we want to talk about those.
Absolutely. I do appreciate all the caveats there. If you're watching this on video, just for you, Nate, you can see I wore a hat in honor of all of those who saw the UAP conversation. This was given to me by an Air Force person who really appreciated my work as we were working in the Nevada area in a certain area. And if you're not watching on video, I've got my Area 51 hat on. So I do like to dispel a few things. When you hear me talking about things and you think I'm saying in absolutes, intelligence analysis does not work in absolutes. It's just not what we do. And I don't want to confuse intelligence with investigations. A lot of times open source intelligence analysts will say they're open source intelligence analysts, but they're more so investigators or capturers of information. And I think some of those people got caught up in all of this and in trying to either dispel some what they thought was disinformation or misinformation, or getting caught up in the I want to gain some following out of this. And just like I just want to reiterate what I said. Absolutely everything I'm saying is I work in probabilities. So when I say things like possible and probable, those are specific terms for me. That means possible means anything below 50% to 15%, and then probable. So that's possible. Probable is anything above 50% to 99%. And I do not go up to 100%. I do not work in absolutes, and that comes from a conversation that has been going on certain platforms about a certain email in question from the service member who did tragically take his own life. And from the looks of it, he specifically did not want to take other people's lives. He wanted to take his own life in a sort of show of force because of things that, first of all, he had done in his career. And Nate, I've told you about this myself. I won't get into specifics. And so if you're listening to this and you don't hear specifics and you're thinking I'm trying to be shady, it's not that. Some of the stuff is still classified, and other things, if I do talk about, I will break down. And we cannot have this conversation if I break down emotionally. So Nate's here to keep me up and And so I've had similar breakdowns as this person, and have had a community around me that really helped get me out of that. And I'm a better person for that today. The person in question obviously did not have the network that I have around him. That's not saying in the military. I mean, his family was breaking down. Things were coming out that led him to this. And I think that gets lost in the conversation about all of this. And, I sent you the email in question. I guess we should frame it. I'll maybe let you frame what's going on.
Yeah,
with
we'll
the
do the
Cybertruck incident.
Yeah, so let's do the Vegas truck. We'll do the Vegas truck first, and we'll focus on that one as far as that goes, because honestly, that one is a little bit more, at least from what I'm gathering over the last few days, a little bit more concrete, that it looks like we have a mental health issue as far as that goes. I think the other one, at least from my perspective of what I can see, it looks like it's very gray at this point as far as defining what exactly happened on that aspect. But as far as Vegas goes, let's kind of talk a little bit about, honestly, let's talk a little bit about where it is with things. I mean, when you look up, not to speak specifically of the person's life, because neither of us know him personally or anything like that. So we're only able to take the information that we see and then correlate it to our own personal experiences. I'll be honest with you, and I'll jump into an exposure aspect with you as well. Like, I also I've had a mental breakdown as well that really destroyed my entire life, my business, my everything, my relationship with my children, and all of that. And I had a similar situation where others that I've known had actually followed through, and I had a point where I'm trying to choose my words because I don't want us to be censored, but I won't describe the action, but I was there and I was ready to go, and I was ready to be done. And the same thing though, I had a network that was there for me, and a network that reached out and knew what was going on. And it's kind of, it's something this year that my partner and I talked about with this podcast, that is more important than any dollar figures we make from any sponsorships or anything at all, is this year going in, because I feel like I'm in a place where I can talk about it a little bit more openly, about that and about other things in my life. And what I found is the more that I talk about what I can talk about, some things I can't talk about publicly because there are things that some people don't want to be involved in, and they've reached out and said, we don't want you to discuss that on the podcast. So respectfully, I will never discuss that stuff either. All I can do is vaguely also say that I've never been in the military, but I've had a mental breakdown that nearly ruined my life. And if I didn't have people around me, I would not be alive today.
Yeah, let's be very clear that just because you're not in the military doesn't mean you can't have PTSD, and
that's why
you can't have breakdowns.
Exactly. I want everybody to understand that a lot of times they watch this stuff with military and veterans, and they're like, oh, well, I don't have that, or I don't feel that. I want everybody to understand that our brains are our brains, and sometimes they're not necessarily equipped for what's going on.
Yeah, and I had, once again, not getting into the conversation, but I had somebody reach out to me because they knew somebody who was having one of these breakdowns, and they said, what do I do? What can I do? The hospital isn't helping. Behavioral health and mental health isn't helping them. And I'm going to tell everybody listening what I told that person, and it is, have a conversation. So I'm going to name some specific names here in this whole email conversation, because I'm very passionate about this, and I want to call things out. We're talking about the email with the sort of manifesto. Some people have come out and tried to dispel the email. Some people are fervently in the camp that this is a factual email. The person sent it, and everything in the email is 100% true. And as I said, I work in probabilities. I think it's probable that the person wrote this email. I've said it from the start. You can ask Nate. I told Nate that. So anybody who wants to come out and say, no, you were saying it because people that you associate with were saying other things, Nate's got receipts. Yeah, he can show that. But my issue with all this was never, Chinese drones or what happened that the UN may be trying to cover up, or the former administrations are trying to cover up. When I read that email, it was a case in mental health crisis. And the people So the guy that got the email, Sam, I don't know Sam. I know he's an intelligence warrant officer. Did great work. He's on the private sector. He said some things during the Sean Ryan show that really pissed me off. One of the things he said, and recently in a Twitter space, yesterday he kind of apologized for making light of the situation, and he specifically in that Sean Ryan episode said he showed the email to his wife and they laughed that if something happens, they've got something on their hands. And that pissed me off, because when you read that email, I don't care what you believe is true, that the feds are after you, that the Chinese have gravitic propulsion drones and all of this stuff. It was a cry for help, and no one helped this guy. No one helped this guy. Why did you not, first of all, send that email to the authorities when you got it December 29th? And then why, when you're talking with this person and telling them, oh, I don't know Fox News and I don't know Sean Ryan, why didn't you say, hey, buddy, do you want to come in and meet me and let's have a conversation? Let's talk about this. He specifically says in the email, if you believe that email is true, he says, I have a massive VBED, VBIED, vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. He says it. That's a red flag. You have to do something about that. So that pissed me off, first of all. All the other conversations that people are having about UAPs and UFOs and what happens in Afghanistan, we can have those conversations, but that I feel we were glossing over what was really going on here, which is someone was having a mental breakdown. Just go ahead and watch A Beautiful Mind and go see what a very intelligent, extremely intelligent person who has a mental breakdown goes through. If you haven't seen the movie, you don't know, he had a complete breakdown and he thought, he was working for the CIA. I still think to this day, no one's ever come out one way or another what he was doing, but he thought the feds were after him and he was having a complete mental breakdown.
It's a thing at all levels of life. And I want people to understand this isn't, like we said at the very beginning, this isn't just a military conversation. This is a mental health conversation. I mean, I won't share names, but I'll share specifically. I have a family member of mine who suffers from schizophrenia and is in and out of hospitals because every time he gets out, he has those lucid moments and then he gets out and then he has these episodes where he just recently was put back in because he broke into a business because he thought the CIA was tracking him and following him. He smashed the back window and was hiding out, and then the cops came in and got him. And there's a lot of people that hear those stories and they'll snicker and they'll laugh. And it's really, I look at it as like going to the casino. It's gambling. Every time you laugh at one of these stories where somebody's having these issues, you're really gambling for the time that it's going to be the last time they have the issue. And not the last time they have the issue because they're, fixed. It's the last time they have the issue because they escalated to a place that we're there. And I think that we're not going to get answers to everything today, but I want, at least today, also for people that are listening to understand that there are other people out there. And if they're even listening to this and having problems, I'll give you an example. On January 2nd, after we were talking, and I had made a mission this year to not reach out and bother people about sobriety, but if people were having problems in their sobriety, to be an open space for them. And I had not even publicly said that. And I get a call from a friend who, same thing, who was my best friend, but didn't really understand what I was going through at that time, where I was really at the bottom, of the rock bottom. But then he saw me come back from it, and he saw me kind of come through it. And he was with me throughout a good bit of it from a distance. But immediately when his friend now is sneaking out of the house, he's leaving his phone at home, he's drinking all the time, he's getting angry and aggressive, and all the escalating signs are there, he calls me and he says, I need to know what to do. And I said exactly the same thing you just said. I said, go find him, go sit next to him. Don't accuse him of being out away from his children and his wife. Just sit next to him and say, what is going on, man? Are you okay? And I said, that's all you have to say to that man. And I said 90% of the time, and I'm not a probability guy as good as you are, but I said 90% of the people are going to break down or they're going to open up right to you on the spot, because nobody's saying that to any of these people, because everybody feels, and I am going to blame a little bit of the people that are not in the issue. Everybody feels uncomfortable. And I get that. And I respect that. But I need people to understand the uncomfortable piece of when that person in your life is no longer there.
It's way
so much
more
worse.
uncomfortable.
It's way more uncomfortable than the 15 minutes or the 3 days or the month or whatever amount of time it takes to help somebody work through that is better than a lifetime of void.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And like I said, we can speak from experience, because that, I guess I won't speak for you, but it was the discussion. It's the reason that I go on certain podcasts to talk about these issues. First, to get the information out there, but second, because it helps me to talk about it. And I think I texted you this. I have so many like wild stories that no one knows about, just because it doesn't. I don't talk about it until it triggers something in my brain, and that's not a bad trigger. Just being like remembering something that had. And I have a lot of great stories from my time in uniform and from my time working with. And I always say this, I don't want people to think I was special forces or anything like that. I worked, I was assigned to special operations, and I worked with some incredible people. And I had some very incredible moments that are very joyful moments that I don't talk about, because it doesn't trigger until the way my brain works. When something from that time it triggers in my brain, I start talking about it, and I will open up and talk everything, and it heals so much of things that I didn't even know I was going through. And once it comes out, just like you said, when it comes out, you have two things. You either break down or you open up, and both things are good. A breakdown is good. People, crying in someone else's shoulders, arms, whatever, that's a good thing. Whether you're a man, a woman, trans, whatever, it's a good thing. Don't let anybody tell you differently. And opening up and talking about things and expressing your feelings, expressing your feelings in a very vulnerable way is good. It's good for you. It's part of our human nature. We want to do that.
I think that one thing that people have to resist too is the part of looking at anybody in these situations as not. When they think of mental health, one thing I don't like about the word mental health is because it automatically makes you think, oh, they're less than because they're not as strong or things like that. And I think people, and let's talk specifically, which is something we both can talk about, which is being men. And being men and dealing with this is a little bit differently. And this is not a poor me, I'm a man at all conversation. There's no victimhood being spoken by either man in this conversation. What it is it's almost a challenge, I think, to other men to shake what's been drilled into us is the sack up, move on, get it up by your bootstraps. And the piece for me that was always the hardest, that actually made it take longer than it should have, was knowing if I took a break, who else was going to provide for the family and provide for other people. And I think that even to this day, I'm getting upset, but not upset in a bad way. It's because I see it a lot. So I spend about an hour every night on TikTok, and my kids think it's funny, but they don't know what I'm really doing. And what I'm doing is I'm in the sober community of TikTok, and I'm in the mental health community of TikTok. And what I do is I go around, and all the different people that are on there telling their stories, I comment and I like and I engage. And a lot of times they don't have comments and they don't have likes, and they're just sitting there pouring their hearts out because they don't have anybody physically near them. And I think people just really don't understand that, when you go in that world, there's guys that are lawyers, there's guys that are doctors, there's guys that are helicopter pilots, there's guys that are Navy SEALs, there's guys that are working McDonald's. And they're all together connecting because of the same issue, is that we've grown up in this distorted reality of what it means to be a man.
I would like to say, you bringing this up, so anybody listening, if you're on any of these social media platforms or YouTube and your first inkling when somebody says something, especially something that you either find funny, in a negative way, or it doesn't align with your worldview or your bias, your immediate response is to put a troll comment or say something disparaging about that person. Listen to what Nate said, like how powerful those words can be, either in a positive or a negative sense. And understand that there is an opportunity that, or a situation where you can comment something, if it's negative, if it's trolling, and you say, hey, that's just trolling, it's funny, and you have the opportunity to do something positive in that person's life, and you do something negative, and they go and go down this whole, and I'm just trying not to get this taken off of whatever platform you're going to take it off, so I'm not going to use certain words, but they decide to go the whole route. That is on everybody that continued to attack that person.
And that's just not the conjecture of us talking. That's law. I mean, there are cases where there's been social media harassment. Someone has completed the task, and that other person has gone to jail and been in court and things like that. Like, it's one of those things where I think we really disassociate reality when we're online. And that's an obvious thing. I'm not stating some profound statement. But when we disassociate the human connection and disassociate humanity, that is a slippery slope. You know, it's like, it's one thing when you're like, there's my online personality and I'm chipper and fun and all this stuff. But like, what's there to be proud of when your online personality is a piece of shit troll?
Yeah. Yeah, that means when you say, well, that's just my online personality. No, deep down, that is part of your personality.
It's just like when people do shit when they're drunk and they're like, I didn't mean to say that to you. No, you did. It just, the drinking just let the filter off.
I mean, how would you feel if, you know, you're in a relationship and your significant other, you know, sleeps around on you only when they're drunk, and they say, no, that's just me when I'm drunk? Are you going to continue to go, oh yeah, that's just them when they're drunk, so that's not really their personality? No, the words that you're saying come from somewhere deep inside of you. Those actions come from somewhere deep inside of you. Now, there are other levels where you know, there's frontotemporal dementia, which Bruce Willis has right now, and that actually it takes away from your frontal lobe, which kind of is your decision maker, and so you have that causes you to have a different personality. And I will say that's not, so we're talking about mental health kind of things, and having certain disorders, that is not your personality. That is part of your internal system that is kind of screwed up and needs, whether it's medication or a therapist or something. So we're not talking about that. We're specifically talking about you wanting to troll just because it makes you feel better as a person, which is exactly what you're doing when you do that. I want to tell people, that moment you go and I say, I'm going to say something disparaging about that person, kind of think, what if I said something positive to that person and it changed their life for the better? How would that make you feel? You'd feel very good about yourself. And I do that with my own self, because back 10, 15 years ago, I was a troll. Everybody, I still am to my brother. He'll tell you that, because I text him. I'm still a troll, but we have that relationship where that's what we do to each other. But yeah, when I was doing intel work and going through my own issues, yeah, I was a troll to some people, and they called me out on it a few times, just being like, you're just being a troll just to be a troll. Like, you need to do some deep thoughts with yourself. So I understand it on a personal level.
I think when people like make comments about, you know, this is drinking that covers this up, or this is this aggression that's covering this up, or he just lashes out, you know, whenever he needs to, or if it's a PTSD situation or whatever it is. I think people, the more we understand, and this only came to me through therapy, was really, we label everything as if it's an easy way to digest it, and then that's the surface level understanding of what it is. So it's like, oh, he has a drinking problem. Oh, he has PTSD. Oh, he has this. You know, it's one of those things where that's like, we do that because we're like, oh, we can understand that. It's a singular statement. It's a couple words. all of our brains are fifth graders. We can digest it and we move on with our life. Let's talk a little bit about how to talk to other people. Like, I don't want to speak from a science standpoint or by a therapy standpoint. I want to talk about, as regular human beings and civilians, what things we can do to be observant, well, number one, of our own family and friends, being naggy without. It's a sensitive place, and I don't even know the answer all the time, and it's very case by case. But like I gave an example, like if I had somebody that was running around and drinking or something like that, I would just go up, sit next to him, and say, "What's going on?" I think that's pretty close to where it is on a lot of places. Obviously, there's other scenarios, I've been in them, where the other person was violent. That was a situation I felt like only me and a few other people could have handled due to size and experience and things like that. So I want to also caution that we're not asking anybody to do something that's going to get them in trouble as well. And I mean that in the sense that I'm going to give a story from my childhood. Was a friend of mine. I don't want to say the details of what it was, but let's just say follow through with the task. But there was a time 2 days before where he tried to follow through with the task, and it was a wrestling match with the tool. And looking back, the wrestling match, unfortunately, while it was an example of there, it could have easily gone wrong, where it could have been two people that were not around anymore. And thankfully, that's not the case of what happened. So I guess I want to say, like, a caution to everybody is, like, yes, we want you to pursue your friends and family and things like that. Sometimes you might need to call the authorities to stay in on things, or call someone that is of a certain skill set to help navigate and mediate those situations as well. So I don't want anybody to get themselves in trouble and in harm's way trying to help somebody by being inspired as well. So I'm trying to walk a tight line with this.
Yeah, and so within the veteran community, and even in people that are still in uniform, we have trusted sources, trusted voices, and that is in the mental health community of the veteran community, meaning people who have dealt with mental health issues, PTSD, or going the whole way through, like we've been alluding to with these wrestling matches. They have trusted sources and trusted voices. Those are people that they can reach out to in the case that they need to reach out to. And then there's no judgment. That's the first thing. When you're going to be a trusted voice for somebody, there's no judgment there. And the second thing is that trusted voice is required to reach out to that person for certain timelines. They put the timelines up there, and to have specific conversations about that. So if you do know of someone who is wrestling with mental health issues, and you want to be a trusted voice for that person, it's not, hey, I'm just going to go do this and get them to open up. No, it's a process, right? And not a professional process, but a process privately between the two of you, where you open up to them if you can with certain situations that you've had, saying, look, I've dealt with this. There's some things that I've noticed that you have been doing. These are all just hypotheticals here, but things I've noticed that you were doing that, give me pause, and I want to have a conversation with you about it. And I'm going to tell you right now that when you open up, there is absolutely no judgment. I am not going to judge you. I'm not here to solve all your problems. I'm here to hear your problems. And then if you want those problems solved, we can have that conversation. But this is not about solutions. This conversation is about, it's about being a friend, being a family member, being the support system of somebody who probably does not have that support system. That's what we saw with the guy in the Cybertruck. It also could be similar to what we saw in New Orleans. I know people are going to maybe be shocked to hear that, because it's a terrorist attack. It was a terrorist attack. That's confirmed. But we've also got confirmation that he really wanted, the guy in New Orleans wanted to, wasn't even going to go to New Orleans and do this. He was going to do it to himself and his family and then said that's not going to do anything. That's not going to do anything to, promote what he wants to promote. And in that aspect, what we're finding out is he wanted to promote Islamic State or ISIS propaganda. And it does deal with, I think, some of the media and what you might talk about and dispel things with the media, which is we are, and I said this on the podcast, on the most recent podcast. I kind of got up on my soapbox and did my own manifesto. I've clipped that out and put it on various other areas because I thought you can kind of hear me breaking in that I'll say speech or manifesto that I was doing. And it was this. The main point was we have now gotten to a stage. I talked about 9/11 and the things that I saw when 9/11 happened, and I raised my right hand to join the military. We all came together as a nation, and so far these other terrorist attacks are happening, and it is American versus American. We're no longer trying to defeat an adversary of the United States. We're defeating ourselves. We're seeing our neighbor as the adversary. We're seeing our fathers and grandfathers and mothers and grandmothers as the enemy, and that's just not the case. We can no longer have discussions or civil debates anymore because everyone's on social media and we've all gotten into our little echo chambers, and anything that anybody says outside of what we believe is an attack on ourselves, and we feel it's an attack on what I feel the United States is, and that comes from a right-wing and a left-wing perspective. If we can't have civil debates in this country anymore, the adversaries of the United States, which there are many, they win. And anyone listening outside of this, the adversaries to freedom, the adversaries to living peaceful in your life as you and your family want to live, the adversaries to that are winning when we have these uncivil discussions.
And this statement will be controversial, but I think people need to understand that it's also not just adversaries. These algorithms are built to exploit vulnerable people. There it is. I mean, we have domestic countries or domestic companies in this country that have created algorithms that prey on vulnerable people. And it's one of those things where, to the point where, like, after a divorce was finalized and the decree became public, and me being somebody with 20 years and a degree in public relations and media and marketing and everything like that, 2 days after a divorce decree goes public online, my algorithms all shift because I'm a 39-year-old white single male. No bearing of understanding of my life, automatically things just shifted to like an unbelievable exploitation of society. And it had nothing to do with my search history. And it was one of those things that it used to be, oh, that you search that, so now it shows up in your algorithm. No. Now it's all connected. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that when something comes up, like whether it's a divorce or some public information, it's not a conspiracy theory. That public information is data scraped via AI, via outscrapers, via data scraping systems, and put into the algorithm as a puzzle piece of your life, regardless of if it's relevant, because it gains the promotion and marketing and sales of the product. And I want people to understand that we sell products via our platform and we use the same type of thing. The problem is we don't prey on vulnerable people and we don't sell dog shit to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I want to stress that piece, because there's something that I don't know the example, but let's just say from the information that's in front of us, the New Orleans situation also seems like somebody that had a rock bottom situation in their life and turned to a community, and the only community was an online community that was receiving him was unfortunately the Islamic State. And had he gone another route, or had he had another door, it's a speculative we could find out that he had many opportunities and he turned them all down and he was gunning for Hades. That could be the case. But the fact is, what's in front of us is another breakdown to someone finding a community, and that community, unfortunately, not being not being the community that would help anybody.
Yeah, and it's all part of how, I've done my own analysis and assessments on the New Orleans situation. I don't know if everybody knows this. I'm from the area. I still have family and friends there. It hurt me dearly when I saw that happen. Look, when I go to New Orleans, and I was there in April. We were just having conversations January 31st at about 6 or 7 p.m. that we were going to go to New Orleans sometime in 2025. I think this solidified it that we will go because I want to support the people there. But what didn't pass the sniff test to me is why New Orleans? Why go from Houston to New Orleans? And the reason being is Houston has 2.5 million people. Yeah, New Orleans is getting ready for the Sugar Bowl. That's really not the biggest event that's going on in New Orleans in 2025. The biggest event is the Super Bowl, then it's Mardi Gras, and that all goes at the exact same time. Just some clarification on Mardi Gras, which is Fat Tuesday. It's a holiday that is famous in the Louisiana area, especially in New Orleans because of the parades. It's not Fat Tuesday. It is called Fat Tuesday, but it's already started. And parades happen on a weekend and week out basis. If you wanted to cause the most amount of damage, you would do it during one of the parades. You would do it during the Super Bowl. But he knew that security was light. New Year's Eve is not that big in New Orleans. It just really isn't. That's not the biggest celebration. New York, maybe LA, outside of the country, things like that, it's pretty big. But New Orleans it's not really that big. But he identified vulnerabilities in the security. Now we're also getting getting information from authorities that he was in New Orleans 2 months ago. This is one of the things I've told people that I'm looking for. Was he in New Orleans before scoping things out? He was apparently with Meta glasses. Those are Meta, the company that owns Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. They make glasses that can, it takes pictures or it can do video in real time. And he was doing that. My question is, where were those images going? Where were those videos going? Because the authorities still say he worked alone, or they said that man, this is what happens with podcasting. You forget, and words are very important, especially in an investigation. And the FBI has said there is no evidence that he acted with anyone else, but that doesn't mean he didn't have help or he didn't work with other people in the lead up to this. So you say, yeah, see, he was in New Orleans, he had Meta glasses on, and he was taking images of it. Where were those images going? I'm not saying the FBI should release where those images were going. There may be some intelligence that they have that's classified that they need to keep classified because it's an investigation, still an ongoing investigation. We're having these conversations about the Fed, and the Fed doesn't want to give anything. And look, anybody that knows me, I became a libertarian probably a decade ago, a true libertarian of freedom, and don't mess with me. I'm not going to mess with you. Not what the politics think a libertarian is.
And just to let people know, I just on Friday went to no affiliation because I want to live my life differently. So I want everybody to know we're not coming from either side. I literally just re-registered my voting to no affiliation. So
yeah. So so like I was saying, with I'm a libertarian, and I have no love. I work with the government, but I have a patch that was given to me by a really good friend of mine that says not endorsed by the U.S. government, and that means a lot. That patch means a lot to me because it's exactly how I feel. The kind of stuff that Sean Ryan during his podcast that he was talking about, that he didn't want to give the email to the quote feds because he doesn't trust the government, he doesn't believe the government or anything. I can't have that mindset. Because knowing people in the FBI and investigators in the FBI, there are good people who do quality work. So if you're just going to say, well, I don't trust anything the feds put out, you should always have healthy skepticism. But when the FBI says we can't release that information, it's not because they're trying to change the information. 90% of the time, I'll use a probability there. It's not because they're trying to change the information. It's because there is an active investigation into what's going on. And if you release the information, it muddies the waters of the investigation. And then you can't do things. So let's say it's, a family member, you lose a family member and you think the authorities think it's one thing and you think it's another thing. And you want the authority to just release all of that information. When you go to court and try to prosecute the person that you think was involved with your family member, you can't hold that up in court, because now the information is tainted and a judge will not allow the jury to hear that. So there are good reasons why information doesn't need to be put out, and there's good reasons why information can't be put out. So when you're having these conversations about the big bad Fed, because they won't release stuff and you think they're trying to cover things up, look, sometimes, there are bad people in every single job. I know as a country, we're very patriotic, most of us, and the majority of Americans support the military. There are bad actors in the military. There's also a support system that can weed out the bad people. But when people in leadership are the bad people, it becomes very tough to do that. So yes, bad actors all over the place, but I feel the majority of people are good people trying to do the right thing. And those are the people that we should listen to.
I think there's that, and there's that towing the line of healthy skepticism, the trust yet verify philosophy and school of thought, which is where I am, and then crossing the line to straight paranoia, where honestly, like, I'll be very frank, like I'm a fan of a lot of podcasts, and I do watch Sean Ryan's show. I don't necessarily agree with him, but I enjoy his guests. When I heard him say that's the beginning of an anarchist type of scenario that really disturbs me. And where it disturbs me is to hear someone in a point of influence. And I am going to say that only because I am a podcaster that has not the influence of Sean Ryan, but I can speak to the fact that one podcaster to another, one show to another, that is a scary thing. And that statement was a scary statement because whether he believes it or not and has the discernment to know that he's half serious or half joking, the audience doesn't. And there's a responsibility. And here's where I get really, there's a line too of this whole world of media discernment. And there's different things that are going on. There's one that podcasters really need to realize the responsibility that they have when creating a community. And a lot of times they like to say, oh, the mainstream media. Well, guess what? The mainstream media has been around forever, not because of the corporate influence, but also because the trust had been going on for so long, because there is a code of ethics, there are standards. And then over time, they deteriorated and went away. But if we go to a place of media, just this anarchist, like crazy realm of media where nothing's verified, there's no facts, nothing is held to any standards, that's not, everybody wants to say that's a great place because we'll get all the information you need. No, you will be thrown all the wrong information and then have to work even harder to find the right information. So I'm very concerned with the way the world is shifting to where podcasters are being given all the responsibility. And I think that's a great thing in certain ways. But I think that there's a lot of podcasters out there that have no
Pandora's box, right?
They have no standards, they have no ethics, and it's all about clicks. And that's where, so here's where I'm going to say a statement that probably will be controversial. When you're running this podcast, you're running it on ad dollars and clicks because you don't want to run your full-time job. That if you don't have a moral compass and a set of standards for your journalism, and you're just driving clicks, you will be distorted to push you'll do exactly what the mainstream media became over the course of decades, was driving for ad dollars as opposed to actual concrete journalism. But the problem is, because we're in the social media world, that will happen faster than it ever did with television. Like television, that took generations to change that media. This would take a year.
Yep, it has. It already has. And
that's what we are there. Yeah.
I want to be transparent and full disclosure. Look, because this might sound like it's a hate on Sean Ryan or maybe Joe Rogan.
It's not at all. It's not,
not
at all. Yep.
So I just want to I've reached out to him in the past. We have had conversations. I believe I still have them, and I can, if anybody wanted to see, we got very close to me going on there. I asked to go if he would be up for it. And he actually did respond back. This was maybe over a year ago. Definitely before he went on Rogan, because that guy has no capacity to get back with anybody because of that. And that's not a dig on him at all. It's just that's what happens. So I reached out. We got very close. I really thought I'd get on there, and I didn't. And it was no fault to him. I do think, look, my account's not that huge. I'm not a conspiracy kind of guy. I don't have those conversations. I don't think I was the right fit for him. But if he ever did reach out, I'd have to think long and hard about actually going on, because I would want to know the angle and that kind of stuff. So it's not a dig on him or any other podcaster, unless you are doing it. Some people that I associate with think that he's only doing it for the wrong reasons. I think he truly believes everything he talks about.
And that's what I want to say is I don't think that he's intentionally putting out some sort of anarchist mentality by any means. I don't think that at all. But what I think is sometimes I think he can sit down, just like you were just a little bit ago saying, when you're in the podcast, you get comfortable. And I think sometimes that happens too. And I think it goes back also to words matter. And I think that it's when those statements are made in these podcasts and taken out of context, it can be completely flipped on to upside down, and then inspires a movement that is not intentionally what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and too many times, somebody, if they're doing it for the wrong reasons, will have that happen and then just go, "Hey, I'm just a voice," and Rogan does it all the time, and for good reason, because he is. That's another guy that I don't think is actively trying to, promote disinformation. He's just saying some things, and look, he's saying things in a conversation. Think about conversations you have with friends and family, and you just say things, and then 20 minutes later you go, "I don't really believe that. Why did I say that?" You're just thinking through things. And a lot of us can think through things with internal dialogue, and some of us can't. Some of us just, from brain to mouth, and you just say the first thing that pops in your head. The first thing that pops in your head isn't really your opinion. First thing that pops in your head is how you're seeing a situation in the time and circumstance that you are in that moment, and it can change. And I always say this: we need to give people more grace when they're saying things and when they're trying to work through things, because if we can't have an open discussion and work through what we're thinking, then things like what we saw in Las Vegas and New Orleans are going to continue to happen, because those conversations are not allowed in public spaces. And to the flip side, if we're only having those conversations with our echo chamber in public spaces, the same thing in Las Vegas and New Orleans are going to happen, because we've built up those echo chambers.
I think that is that's the part that I think is the most important to this. And I think people need to realize, podcasts are on the rise, and I believe they're going to be a benefit to society, and I believe they're going to be a benefit to society for exactly what you just said. The podcast styles like this one, like Sean Ryan's, like Rogan's, like those that are of a open conversational forum of conversation and genuine connection, that is going to put out real stuff. And sometimes that's what I'm trying to say, is that real stuff sometimes can be clipped up and taken the wrong way. And I think that one thing that's important is I used to be in a nonprofit. I worked for a nonprofit one time, and there was somebody that worked there that spoke so slowly and paused all the time before they answered everything. And it was very frustrating to communicate with this person. And eventually what I learned was, I was like 21 years old or so when I was working with her, and I'll always remember this. And I was like, what was going on? What was going on? And now in the past couple of years, it actually hit me. What she was doing wasn't some mental breakdown or anything like that. She was choosing every single word that came out of her mouth. And she was making sure every single thing was, now it was to a very big extreme where it deterred the conversation. So that's not the extreme I'm trying to talk about. But what it is important for podcasters to, honestly, it's important for more podcasters to not do polished podcasts. It's important for more podcasters to get out there and show the bloopers, show the behind the scenes, do the real form, do the part where you picked your nose, or the other part where, like, I just had a episode a couple of weeks ago where somebody was playing with their face the entire time and didn't realize it. And they're like, oh my God, why did I do that? And I'm like, it doesn't matter, because that's what life is. The more that we make podcasts a reflection of life, and we show Sean Ryan's, Joe Rogan's, a million other podcasts that exist that are conversational, open book forums where everybody can come and speak their piece, bring their receipts, but speak their piece. That's the way the world used to work and should work. Not used to work. I don't want to say that. I don't want to put you some utopian thing. We've always had civil discourse and everything like that. But I guess what I want to say is, for me personally, that's the way I would love the world to be, is that we met people at a table, we met people in the middle, we met people where they were, and we had open forum conversations, not the way of, oh, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't do this, just talk about each other. Well, yeah, nobody's gonna have any disagreements if we cut out all the fun, you know. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm gonna bring up but at the same time, not to let those things define us, is what I'm trying to say too. Yeah.
And I'll bring up something else as I'm getting alerts here. Sorry about that. You can keep that in, since we're
You're good too. I'm paying attention to the time. You're good.
Okay, good. And listen, I have all the time in the world today. I'm snowed in, so not snowed in. I am snowed in. We've got snow here. That's a totally different conspiracy conversation. But I'll bring up another person, and I'll bring this person up, and people will probably go, "Man, you guys only talk about these people that they consider white, racist, homophobic." But Jordan Peterson, right? Jordan Peterson is an incredibly intelligent person, and I will ask anybody who's listening who wants to verify what I'm about to say. When that guy is doing a discussion and he is asked a question, he does not. I respond immediately, because I've already formulated in my head, and sometimes it doesn't come out eloquently, and that's an issue that I have that I need to fix on my own communication. But when he does it, there's a 3 to 5 second pause, because he's doing a couple of things here. One, he's taking in the information and he's trying to formulate a proper response to the information. The other thing he's doing is he's giving the person his full attention. He's letting them know, I have listened exactly what you're saying. When you were talking, I wasn't already formulating a response. I was taking in everything you said, and now I'm going to formulate my response. So he takes, 3 to 5 to 10 seconds, and then makes the response. And he starts from the beginning, and it's sort of a linear conversation that he has. And that is exceptional communication. That it may sound like to some people, what's he doing? He's paused. That's not good podcasting, first of all, when you have a 2 to 3 second, 5 second pause. People are wondering if their phone's glitching or their headphones are doing something, and you kind of lose focus. But it is good for communication. When you're having a face-to-face with somebody and you take that 3 to 5 seconds, and usually I've started to do it. I do it at work, and a lot of people, they know when they ask me a question, they're like, uh-oh, here we go. Because I'm going to give them my full attention, do everything. And I will always start by going, and that means I'm processing it. That's not just a tick that I have and I just go, like.
That's the AOL dial-up going.
Yes, I'd had AOL, I had dial-up, and that's probably how our minds work for you and I in our generation. But it's that second, that 3 to 5 seconds to process the information and understand what the person is really asking. And if you don't understand, ask the question. I've tried to do that now as well. Somebody will ask, what do you think about this? And then my first response, you'll hear this on the podcast when Tiana kind of goes off and she asked me something I wasn't prepared for. And if I don't know a lot about it, I'll be like, I don't really know. Can we move on? But if I do know a lot about it, my first response to her is, do you want me to go down this road? Because if you really legitimately want to know, I'm going to say what I know.
Yeah.
And she'll always go, yes, absolutely. I want to know everything you have to say on it. And that's the first thing I always ask people when they ask, especially a tough question. Like I deal with Israel, Gaza, but go all through Israel, Gaza, Israel, Syria, Israel, Lebanon, Russia, Ukraine, all of these tough situations that everyone wants to have an opinion on, and they think they're right about their opinion, myself included. I always give a second to process, and I always ask the person if they want a legitimate response. And sometimes I'll ask, especially if I know a person's a troll and they just want to ask me because they think I don't know the answer to the question. I go, are you asking me legitimately? Do you legitimately want me to answer? Or do you want my conspiracy response? Do you want my troll response? Some people do. I have good friends that ask me questions that know I'm the guy that when they say, you believe the moon landing never happened? And I'm the guy that goes, you believe in the moon? Jeez.
That's a good one.
We can have those are great conversations. I'm a guy that loves it. I tell everybody all the time, oh, do you want to hear the conspiracy? Because I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by conspiracies, how they start, who starts them, and then how they grow and how those communities grow in a positive or negative way. I think the UAP community can be a very positive community if they have support, right? Going deep down the rabbit hole can do terrible things to your mental health, but having a community, that's important. That's why every religion you see has Christians. You go to church a certain time, not because and the church will say that's where God is, that's where Jesus is, or in the Muslim community, a mosque, that's where God, that's where Allah is, that's where Muhammad is. The Torah, when Jews go to the synagogue, that's where God is. Yes, that's what the community says, but it's really about being a part of a community. And if you're living in a tough situation, this is why I don't denigrate religions. I do think they have some negative aspects to it of controlling people, but I also feel it's a net positive for people to have a community. If you're not a sports guy like me, you don't have certain communities, and we all have our hobbies. Find people who are interested in the same things as you. If that is UAPs and UFOs, that's great. If that's these conspiracies about JFK and stuff like that, and you have positive conversations with people, and you can go, grab a beer, or in your case, grab a water with somebody, or a mocktail of some sort, and sit down and have fun. You come away from those conversations with people positively. Now, if you're just sitting in your basement, hypothetically in a basement, that's what we always say, you're in your mom's basement. I am in my basement. That's where I do most of my work from. But if you're just sitting in your basement and you're perpetually online, that is a negative thing for your mental health. I know this because I go through it, because I have to be perpetually. I don't have to be. Change how you perceive things. I get to be perpetually online because certain things are going on that I want to call out, and I need to have certain information to do my job. So I am perpetually online. I also know that that does terrible things to my mental health, but I have a support group with my wife, and especially my kids, who I love dearly as well, who are nothing but positive parts of my life. With that, if you have a support group and it's negative, and it's always negative, you might want to change your community.
I think there's one thing too that with that is you use the term net positive a bunch, and I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that term. And I want to actually focus in on that term for a second. Is that a lot of times, and this is not to the extreme of anything, but sometimes we get stuck in this cancel culture where we don't like the way things are, or we don't like what that is, we delete it and we bury it and we throw it under the rug. Obviously, that's a trauma response, and the suppression is an emotional thing. But I think that if you keep that net positive term and you keep the trust yet verify term we've talked about throughout this episode, and you start to discern things and start to look at different aspects of things, sometimes something that might look negative initially, with a little bit more discernment and verification, there's a net positive to it. And I think that like a lot of sometimes what you're saying is exactly that. Being online, let's say, like being online all the time, everybody's like, oh, don't be online all day long, don't be online all day long. But if you blend it together to a net positive, like you get some outside time and you get some online time, and you live in Iowa where there's nobody around, there's no men's groups, there's no, places to be around, you might have to have a blend of outdoor activities and remote activities and things like that. So I want people to understand that I appreciate you use that term net positive a good bit. And I want people to know what that really means is that unfortunately, sometimes not everything's going to be green and red.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a lot of times that as I get a lot of jokes about the dating world in the 40s and stuff like that. Now it's like, red flags and green flags. And I'm sitting there like, where's all the gray flags? I'm like, where's the people that know their shit, know they're fucked up, but know they want to be good people?
You're looking at him, right?
Exactly. And I think it's a lot for everything. I think it's true in a lot of things in this life is that we have come to expect as a society pristine, polished, finished products to a point where we're allowing it to affect our human relationships. We're allowing it to affect who we hire at our businesses. Where it's just these things where everybody has to be a perfection and 100% or they're worthless.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we could think of the most positive things. I believe the United States is a positive thing, but it's an imperfect union. The Constitution says it's to establish a more perfect union, not a perfect union, a more perfect. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about net positive. Things are going to be positive and negative about anything. If you are a full-on capitalist, you probably think, let's start with communism or socialism. You think it's the worst thing that could ever happen. And for certain countries, it was the worst thing that ever happened to those countries and to the people in those countries. And I know that because I've spoken to those people who went through it. And that's what they've told me. You're not looking for, is it perfect? Is it terrible? You're looking for, okay, there are positive and negative aspects. Does the positive outweigh the negative, or does the negative outweigh the positive? When you're looking for these communities or you're looking for things to make you a better person, you're not going to find something perfect. You're going to find the right thing for you, the net positive for you. And I think in some of these situations, people get caught up and can go down a dark road because they see, and then sometimes they see grifters who will promote certain things and say, especially like the health community or working out or the dating communities of do this and it's going to make your life better. Well, it doesn't work for everybody. And so it doesn't work for the majority of people. And so if it doesn't work for the majority of people, that means there's a majority of people who are going to have a net negative for doing that. And that's going to be harmful for them.
I was told somebody one time it's 15% is what I was told. And that's not scientifically proven, but anything you project really it only affects 15% of the people you're talking to. So those courses and all that. Yeah. Like those courses and all that stuff that's being pumped out to the world and the dating, all that, it's all 15%. And even to the point where if you look at like dating app data, I've even looked at that from an algorithmic standpoint. It's a filtration down to, I think, 10 to 15% as well, where really 10 to 15% is only what's actually active and what's actually connection and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It does not work for everybody. And if it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean you are wrong. Right. That means you're in the majority.
Exactly.
So you need to go find.
That's the problem. That is the problem right there. And thank you for saying exactly that. We're then made to feel shame if we don't connect to that popular thing. So if something's popular and we don't connect to it or resonate with it, there must be something wrong with it. When really it's like, just wait around for the next popular thing. There's going to be another thing that's going to connect with you.
Yeah, we do that a lot of times with diets. Look, I was in the country of Poland for a while, and I was doing the keto diet. If you know the ketogenic diet, it's a lot of fats, and it was a fad for a while. It's kind of died down a little bit, but there's still those communities because, like you said, 15% it works for. What I found, even though I promoted it and said, look, it really works for me, it did not work for me. You know why? Because I'm not doing it anymore. Because and I think there was one moment where I really figured it out, and I was in Poland, and I was eating butter, all these, no carbs, no vegetables, nothing like that. And one day I went to the Ladybug, which is a grocery store that's out there, and I bought every Oreo, Milka, every sweet treat I could find, and had zero protein, zero, ketogenic ketogenic benefits to it. And I sat by myself in my room and I ate everything, to the point where I sent pictures. I was working with individuals, and I sent pictures to them saying, "Hey guys, I'm off the rails." It was a joke. I knew what I was doing. It did not work for me. And I had to move past that and try to figure other things, because health is very important. But we're not monolithic creatures. We're all different. Our blood types are different. That means we need and we require different things. So, carnivore diet works for some people. It doesn't work for others. Being a vegan works for some people. Don't disparage vegans unless they're always just talking about veganism. Then I'll say you can disparage them. But don't disparage vegans, because that's what works for their body.
That's exactly. I mean, for me, it's like it's a lot of conversations too in this world. Is for Alcoholics Anonymous, AA didn't work for me, and it didn't work for me at all because of the structure and because of the religious overtones of it and things like that. And so I couldn't connect with it. And so they don't look at the non-alcoholic beers, like when you mentioned about grabbing a beer. I do go out with my buddies still. We just closed a bar for my buddy's 40th a couple weeks ago, and I drink Athletic and no other brands, Heineken Zero and things like that. So I drink non-alcoholic beers when I'm out, and it allowed me to be able to connect with my buddies. And we are, instead of me hanging out at my house eating Oreos and doing all the hitting the dopamine with all the sugar, I then was able to leave my house for the first time in 2 years. And not leave my house like I'm secluded. I go out all the time, but to go out in a drinking environment, like closing a bar at 2 a.m. and not feel uncomfortable at all the entire night because I had non-alcoholic beers in my hand. And for me, that's a different thing too. Like, there's a lot of people in the alcoholic community and sobriety community that shun non-alcoholic beer because they believe it's a gateway back to drinking. For me, because I guess it's because I grew up in the alcohol industry and I worked in the industry, it's now this tool for me. And so that's kind of where for me it works. But I tell people, I'm like, for me it works, but if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. There's other options. So,
well, you bring up a very interesting point, because I want to show the dichotomy of the conversations we just had with my ketogenic experience and your what we call near beer. I don't know if you guys called it, but in the military, that's what we called it, near beer. So I was doing it in my room alone, and just went hardcore on some Oreos, and they're the company's Milka in Europe, and they actually make like a Hershey bar that has Oreos in, like actual mini Oreos inside and it's absolutely incredible. But I was by myself. I did not have a support system with me. I could have reached out to anybody and say, hey, I'm about to go down off the deep end here. I could use some support. Whereas you were at a bar with friends who knew that you were sober, and you said, I'm going to drink these 0% non-alcoholic beers because I want to be a part with you guys, and I don't want you guys to feel like you can't do certain things around me. Can you please support me as I do this? And you have that support system. And so, unless you have very terrible friends, and some people do, who are just going to say, come on, just do it, dude.
No, not at all. Not one person over the entire course of the night offered me anything, asked me why or anything. I mean, they all know, but it was the first time in 2 years where I felt normal again. And it felt good because I've spent 20 years selling alcohol. My face was a brand in social media in the alcohol industry. And the second I quit and went sober, it really, I had unfortunately allowed that business part to become a part of my personality. So there was a mental, emotional transition that had to happen. And it was a very fun night in the sense that for me, I'm the only one the next day that remembered everything, which was the hilarious part. So when everybody started to tell stories, I had to remind everybody who actually has the accurate story.
Well, there you go. And so you're a net positive to them, because as they're getting out of control, as we all do. Look, I do partake in that. I still have a clearance, so I can say I partake in alcohol. It's if I told people, I am doing dry January. I do want to say that for myself. But if I was in uniform and told the military how much I did drink, sometimes we did have this joke at the when I was with special operations. Some of us would get called in to kind of do a mental health evaluation and certain evaluations, and they would say, "How many times do you drink?" We always told people, lie. Do not tell them how many times you drink a week. One guy did. They were like, "So how many times?" We all would say, 2 times. I'd have 2 drinks a week, 2 to 4 drinks a week. Cool. My thing is always 2. If I say 2, that probably means I'm lying.
That was mine when I was drinking too.
Yeah, I only had 2, only 2. 2 to 4 times. Just tell them that. One guy was like, "Oh, I drink 6 times a week, probably have 5 or 6 a night." And the investigator was like, "What?" And they had that written in. And that's probably a net positive for that person and a net negative for me in trying to lie about how much I drank. But I haven't gotten to the point, I don't remember, where I've gotten to the point where I was a danger to myself or others. When I get to that point, and I hope this whole conversation that we're having, that the thread on this is have a support system.
Yep. And that's exactly it. Yep.
If you don't have people around you that legitimately support you. Look, I hate to break it to some people, the people on social media that you may interact with 1 or 2 times a week, they don't have your best interest in mind. They have their best interest in mind. I can say I'm 99% sure Nate has my best interest in mind, and I have Nate's best interest. And I can tell you 100%, I'm the only time I'm going to be 100%, maybe not the only time, but one of the times I'm going to say 100%, if you texted me and said you had, you were going through something personally, I would not be a troll in that. And I would try to identify how to help you. That's the support system that you need to have. I think in the male community, we have some problems because, and I'm in it too. So when my family gets together with people that I am friends with in the military, in the veteran community, or that I've worked with in the past that are male as well, we have this tendency to rip on each other. And that is our love language when we're together.
That group that I went and closed the bar with, those are my college rugby buddies.
There you go.
You can imagine what that crowd was like.
and so some people are shocked when they hear that. Just certain things and some people will pull me to the side.
I think you're right. I like that you said that about it. Like, guys, a lot of our love language is ribbing and busting chops. And it's like, and a lot of other people don't feel, I shouldn't say a lot of guys. Let's not say that. Let's say,
well, no, so I will say this. I think
we're both the same, is that is our love language of our group of friends. I'll say it about our experience.
In the male community, when you're in, and we do that. We talk about this in the veteran community a lot. I was an Army guy. I rib on the Air Force. I rib on the Marines, eating crayons, the chair force and the Air Force, the Navy. I won't say some things we say about the Navy because you might get demonetized completely and canceled. And we say that to each other. But if someone from the outside of that circle, so this is how you know you have a good support group. You rib on each other and you say the worst possible thing. No one put group chats in the public domain. Do not do that because those are private and those are in a circle of trust of people who are ribbing on each other for the most part. And what I will say is, you're in a good circle of trust if somebody outside that circle comes in and starts to rib on somebody within your circle, and everyone goes 100% just against that person because they are outside. So in the veteran community, if someone is not a veteran or they have not worn the uniform and they rib on the Marines or the Army or the Air Force or special operations, Green Berets will talk crap about the SEALs and the Rangers. But when someone from outside that community comes in and tries to do the same thing, if you're in a good support group, they're going to remove that person by force from that circle and get them out. That is a good support group.
Yeah, it's really, I'm glad we're talking about this, and I'm glad we're talking about all this stuff in the detail that we're talking about. And I think that what I think everybody is that keep going back to that net positive of what we said. And it's like, I think 2025 is the year that if I was to give any advice or unsolicited advice that nobody asked for during this episode to enter the world, it was to live a little more in the gray sometimes. And I think that 2024 was very black and white, and things are chaotic in the world. But if we stay with net positive every day and we say, okay, we can't control the crazy stuff that's going on in this world, but if we just have a net positive day every day and keep building on that, that's I think where we can start making some real powerful things as a society. And I think right now, especially with the way that we kicked off the year, obviously paranoia is high, heightened tension is high for obvious and verifiable reasons. Nothing is to be ignored. That's not what I'm trying to say. But there's a channeling balance that needs to occur on a daily basis to continue to move forward in a progressive way.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think it's a good spot to I'm trying to be the host here for you.
No, I'm actually trying to close out too. I just put the time on, dude. I didn't look over at all. I just saw you squirming, and I'm like, I looked at my clock. I was like, shit. So yeah, go ahead with the wrapping up final thoughts there. Sorry.
Well, I just think that is a great spot to leave it in 2025 to start out 2025, and I talk about having a good support group and a good community around you, and how that group will call other people out who are outside of that community, who try to say disparaging things about the community. But the same is true for that community to call you out when you're doing things. And I think we should be alone with our thoughts and think through things. Think of the worst thing you could possibly think of. If it pops in your head, don't go, oh man, I'm a terrible person. Go, why did I just think that? Let's go through it. And to have a support group that when you're processing all of this stuff, that's my problem with cancel culture. When you're processing all this stuff and you automatically say something, you're just trying to work through it. It's worse to say, get out, I don't ever want to talk to you again, than it is to go, why did you just say that? Can you explain what you were thinking when you said that? And maybe we can come together. And you could even think, whatever you're thinking right now, the worst possible thing you could say in the world, you can go, you really would, if somebody said that, you wouldn't kick them out and ask them. And I would ask, I'd say it when people go and say disparaging things about me automatically, or someone within my family. I don't go, get out of here. I go, what is your issue? What's your issue, dude?
Yep.
What are you going through? That's my perspective. What are you going through? Because it says more about you than it does about me. And if you allow that person to talk through it, sometimes you'll get to a point where they make an apology. And that's what I talked about with Sam on Sean Ryan's show, and how they did a Twitter space. And he apologized because he understood that the things he was saying, just processing it through in real time on a podcast, was maybe not the right thing. And he made an apology. We should give everyone grace in order to make that apology, but don't force the apology.
No, and as we did talk about Sean Ryan in a negative sense, I do want to follow up with that exact thing. Is that one thing that if anybody does follow him, he does actually, when things are incorrect on his show, he always does come back and circle back with it, whether it's a separate video, whether it's an article on the website or the newsletter. He communicates that. And I think that's an admirable thing in today's world, is that it is okay to misspeak and it is okay to follow the wrong rabbit hole. But it is important when you're in a platform of influence and audience to go back, because most likely you got to remember that crowd followed you down that rabbit hole. So you got to bring them back too.
Yep. And he did that recently. If you remember, I think it was maybe a month ago with the UAPs.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. He had somebody who was in the drone. He was the creator of a company that builds drones, and he was talking about sniffing out nuclear weapons. And Sean Ryan reached out to him. So another positive thing about it, I think we should put negative and positive things on this and end on a positive note. He reached out to the guy, and they were going to go on podcast. He was going to go on Sean Ryan's podcast, and as much as he talks about the feds and hating the feds, the FBI contacted Sean Ryan and said, "I don't think you should have this person. What he's saying is not true, and he might be under investigation." There's a podcast that I go on that I'm good friends with. It's George Fontes, and he reached out to the guy and got a response from him. And I was going to do an interview with him, moderated by George Fontes. And I said, "Hey, listen, first of all, I think he might have a problem where he could be investigated by the FBI if he does know this information." And George came back to me and he said, "Hey, I haven't heard back from him after the initial, when I wanted to schedule it, he didn't talk." So yes, vetting is done. I know Ryan Macbeth, who's an intelligence analyst, somebody I respect, who's been on my podcast, said that Sean Ryan doesn't vet his audience. He did it in real time. So I know that's not true. I know that he does. He also put some people on there that I would probably not have on my podcast.
Yeah, and even to the extent of political things. I mean, I know he had made a comment about with Kamala Harris and North Carolina and a FEMA issue and all that stuff, and then he misspoke on the podcast and then made a whole separate video giving the full story. And I think those are admirable things that we don't do in the media. That's one thing that I think, though. Again, I'll close this out with some positives as well. Is that is one thing that the podcast world does have an opportunity to do that the mainstream media does not do. We do not see retractions. When there are retractions, they're buried into other links and things like that. They're not formal focal points of conversation. And I think in closing, I want everybody to understand that there was a lot discussed here through media discernment and through mental health. There were no questions in advance. Kervin and I have just been texting over the past few days about the current events, not even about what to discuss today. We just said media discernment and mental health was the objective into the conversation, and this is what came out of it. So I want people to understand there's no cue cards, there's no teleprompters, there is no script, and there is no prep. Literally, I'm the laziest podcaster on the face of the earth. But with that comes very organic conversations and authentic ones. I appreciate our friendship. I'm going to go into 2025 saying the word friendship with you. You're no longer a guest. Also, and congratulate you that you are the most frequented guest on the FreeMind Network.
Nice. I love it. And that's because when you ask me to come on, I do not say no, because I consider you a friend as well now that we keep in contact with each other. And that's part of a support group. And that means a lot to me that you would accept that friendship and that we can have these discussions. And I hope moving forward, especially if the audience feedback is a net positive, let's bring that back up. If I'm a net negative for the audience, I would hope you would tell me. And because I think sometimes I go on some podcasts, and I always say this. I always say, I hope I'm value added to your audience. And then I don't hear from that person anymore. And I don't go look at comments or anything like that, but I'm sure I said some things that some people disagreed with, and I was not a net positive for their audience. And I'm fine with that. I'm not for everybody. I'm 41 years old. I know what I look like. I know what I sound like, and I know my opinions. It's not for everybody. I would also caution anybody who hears any podcaster say one thing and then go back and hear them say something 2 years ago and then say, yeah, but you said this. So you remember you said that on that podcast. If you put up a podcast that was on 2 years ago and asked me what I said and my opinions on it, they will probably be different from today, because this is how the intelligence cycle works. It's a question I wanted to ask, like either Sam or Sean Ryan, who's within the intelligence community, within the intelligence cycle. you have the dissemination portion. Dissemination is where you give your customer the information. And I want to ask, do you know what comes after dissemination? And I think a lot of Intel guys will say, well, nothing, that's it. That's not true. It's a circle. So it goes dissemination at the end, back to planning and direction. Planning and direction is the first part of the intelligence cycle. Once you have dissemination and you've disseminated it to the customer, you go back to planning and direction, because with new information comes new assessments. If you don't add new information, talk about this email situation that we're talking about, if you don't allow that new information to change, that verifiable new information to change your assessments, then you're working with bias and you're working within your own worldview and echo chamber. And that is not a good way to do any assessment for anyone at any point in their life.
Kervin, for your time today. I will have this up and edit this through and have this up today.
Thanks so much for having me on, and I will always say yes whenever you want me to come on, unless I absolutely cannot. Let me just put that out.
No problem at all. And I appreciate the hat today. That was a great nod to everything
Yes,
going on.
I had to wear it.
You have a good rest of your day, buddy.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.